So, with Pokemon's birthday upcoming, I figured that there's a good chance they announce the next generation. So, I should make my own little video before this comes out, talking about what I think would be really interesting in a potential Gen 9 region. Now, there was a lot of countries in the world that I wanted to base mine off of. I thought Italy, Germany, or a Scandinavian country could be interesting, but we've had a couple European countries now, so I think we should go for a new continent, which left me with really two choices in mind. I'd either go for a African or Australian region. And, well, I know more about Australia, so I chose an Australian region. So I think Australia has plenty of potential, and I think this would make a genuinely amazing region, especially if they implement a lot of the ideas I'll talk about later in this video. It's got plenty of unique and diverse wildlife, it's a very big place with a lot of things, and I mean, there have been plenty of games that have been based in Australia, and they're pretty different. You go from games like Tide the Tasmanian Tiger, Cow the Kangaroo, Crash Bandicoot. Granted, those are all 3D platformers, but still, they're very different. The scenery and the themes and the music, I think, you really have a large potential for this region where plenty of ideas can come together. So, without further ado, let's begin. The first thing I'm going to be talking about is the actual region itself. So, I had some ideas for the Australian region, specifically more the map. It may be a bit ambitious, but if you've ever seen Australia on a map, you can see it's quite big. It's actually the 6th biggest country in the world. And this may be ambitious, but I feel like I've got to pull something big to really win back a lot of the hearts of the fans. So I was thinking, what if they went for something similar to Pokemon Legends Arceus? And instead of making this region kind of small, they really make it big. But they split up the areas, and instead of being like routes per se, they're just kind of like the areas in the Hisuian region, where you have these giant, free-to-explore open ranges that you run around and make your way to, and you can have different entrances and exits that are only accessible after certain points or getting certain ride Pokemon, and it could be a really nice way to almost reimagine, because I feel like recent Pokemon games have been less about exploring and more going in a straight line, so this could reopen that. And I really enjoyed Legends Arceus. It was really a breath of fresh air when playing it, and I think this could be an awesome feature to implement. And I almost wonder why would they make Legends Arceus such a big deal if they weren't planning on formatting their style to that. I mean, the wild area is already pretty similar to that in Galar, so why not make this like that? And I think that could be really cool. Especially if they did some sort of hybrid system where maybe the towns and cities were a lot more linear, like the older Pokemon games, but the actual exploration of the game, the outside was open, It would kind of create a nice sense of contrast of being free to explore and also kind of being in a more safe environment. So I can understand why people might question my credibility for this. I'm not Australian, I've never been to Australia, and I can't even do that great of an Australian voice impression. Good on ya, mate. So, I decided that I would go and ask for help from a good friend of mine who is from Down Under. I got my friend, not FieryDance. He is an Australian Pokemon enthusiast and an amazing artist. He helped me a lot with later sections of this video with talking about Pokemon, and he also came up with the next segment of the video, some things about Australia, some fun facts, some interesting things to make the game feel more personal and have more culture to it. Stuff that I wouldn't be able to do on my own because I'm not from Australia. I wouldn't know these things. So, massive shout out to him. Link in the description to his Twitter if you want to see his amazing art. The first question I asked was, what are some fun facts about Australia? Fiery replied with, most of Australians live within 500 kilometers of the coast. The platypi are venomous, the kangaroo and emu are on the Australian coat of arms, and the 50-cent coin because they can't walk backwards. So yeah, that's quite interesting. I didn't actually know that Australia was mostly coastland. Considering it's so big, I figured a lot of people would be living somewhere inland, but I guess the areas aren't inhospitable, which does lead to a lot of interesting potential for the region. As I stated earlier, I could well imagine this region containing a lot of areas similar to the wild area that we saw in Gen 8, or probably more similar to how we saw it in Legends Arceus. The second question I asked was, what are some lesser known popular locations, buildings, or places that are in nature? Fiery responded with, Lunar Park. It's definitely a big one. It's a big amusement park in the city. The entrance is immediately recognizable to Australians. Lunar Park is something I've never heard about up until now, so I also feel like this could be an interesting place to place a gym. You can have a town similar to Mombasa, where maybe it's more themed on an amusement park, and you've got to have some sort of theme park related gym. My third question was, what features, items, Pokemon, or really just anything you'd want or dream of for a Pokemon game to have if it ever came to Australia? Nathan responded with, maybe some of the Aborigine, the natives. Dreamtime stories like the Rainbow Serpent or how animals got their colors would be good for Pokemon design, and maybe the evil team has something to do with wanting to bring back some Pokemon from the Dreamtime stories. Original Komola and or Kangaskhan, maybe the Opera House would be a gym like the Eiffel Tower in Galos. I thought these were all really interesting things from Fiery. I really like the idea of an evil team that's trying to bring back Pokemon from fairy tale stories almost like no one believes in them, but they're willing to push through anyway and revive them. I'll talk about it more later in the video, but the regional Komola and Kangaskhan are interesting ideas since they are animals that are natural to Australia. And the Opera House has to be in a game they make around Australia. When I think of Australia, that's one of the first things I think of. Lastly, I asked Fiery what he thought about the names I gave to the region. Pokemon Opal and Pokemon Topaz. Opal and Topaz are good names, but maybe design the Legendaries first, then names, instead of making the names and then having to design the Legendaries around it. Fiery does bring up a good point. You should not name the games before you design the Legendaries, but considering I'm not Nintendo and I'm not the one who has to do all the marketing and branding, I'm gonna just take the liberty of keeping it the way that I did. Thank you once again, Fiery, for helping me with this video. I hope to do more stuff with you in the future, and once again, check out his stuff in top link in the description. He makes amazing art. Trust me, I have seen him and worked with him over the years. He's just amazing. So, that moves us on to the next segment of this video, the Pokemon. Arguably, the most important part of a Pokemon region is the actual Pokemon themselves. So, I've compiled a long list of potential Pokemon, but I've only highlighted several of these Pokemon that I think could actually make really good Pokemon. I'm not saying that these other animals can, but these are just ones that, in my mind, I was able to connect. So, some things to know. I may mispronounce these actual animals' names, but I will have photos of them on screen. And I also tried to include new type combinations. I didn't go out of my way to make every single one of them a new type combination, but I figured one of the new and fun, exciting things about new Pokemon are new type combinations. So I did really try to get a lot of the lesser used, or just not used at all, type combos. So, without further ado, let's begin. Starting things off with the regional rodent, I will go with a Bilby. I've decided to make it a normal ghost type, without many valid reasons other than why not. I don't see a reason why it couldn't be, and I think I could make this a little bit more intimidating since, at least from what I see, Bilbys aren't that intimidating, but I think this could be a funny little twist on it. For the bird, I would go for a sulfur-crested cockatoo. There are plenty of birds in Australia, but every time I think of an Australian bird, this is the first one I think of. Maybe that's because I watched Rio when I was younger, but this is just what I think of. I think a pure flying type would suit this well. I mean, I have other flying types in the future, so do not worry. But I think that there's so many variations of birds that the regional bird doesn't need to be this special type combo to really stand out. So for the Pikachu clone, I had a little bit of irony. I really doubt Nintendo would allow this, but I went for a Bandicoot. Because why not? It fits. Why not? Why not have a Pikachu clone be a Bandicoot? I really don't think they would allow that because, you know, Crash Bandicoot, but hey, let a man choose his Pokemon. I would allow this Bandicoot to be a pure electric type. Personally, I also don't see a real big need to make this a crazy type combination, but anyways, moving on to the regional bug, I chose a Scorpion. Yes, I know, Skorupi, but listen. I am choosing, in my opinion, the most bizarre type combination that has never been used. A bug dark. Most bugs are nocturnal. How have they not made a scorpion Pokemon, or any Pokemon that is dark? Bug, I mean, hell, Skorupi even is a dark, Drapion even is a dark type. But, yeah. I think this has a lot of potential. We could have maybe a more intimidating or more realistic looking Scorpion compared to Drapion, or they can totally go for a more bug or stylized approach to this. The final of the regionals is the Pseudo Legendary. Now, I thought this would be a cool one. People can disagree with me, but I decided to make it a gecko. I'd have it start off as a gecko and be a ground fairy type, and as it evolves into a Megalana, which is a distinct species of giant lizard. Now, Pokemon is not shy to having Pokemon evolve from one animal to another, so I don't see a big issue with this. Plus, it adds that kind of similar cute to scary dimension that we often see with the Pseudo Legendary. And personally, I would make this a ground fairy Pokemon. It's unused, and I think it fits a gecko pretty well. So, for the Legendaries, I'd make it an Emu and a Cassowary. I'm pretty sure I said that wrong, but anyways. I mean, it's hard to not choose an Emu, especially after, the war on an Emu. Plus, I think a Cassowary is a nice little counterpart to that. They're both birds that cannot fly, and they're both in Australia. So, for the Emu, I'd probably go with Fighting Ground, and for the Cassowary, I'd go Flying Steel. I think they're just interesting types, For the third Legendary, I think the Rainbow Serpent that Fiery brought up earlier would be a really cool addition. It could be a fairy dragon, and I just think it would really add a little bit of contrast, but also be a really unique and interesting Pokemon. Keeping on to that bird theme, I'm moving now on to two other birds that can be found in this region. So, I wanted to go for a Rainbow Lorikeet. It is a beautiful bird that is just stunning to look at, so I decided to make it a fairy flying type. Its color scheme definitely fits with the fairy, plus it almost can fit with its potential regional counterpart or game counterpart. One game might have the rainbow and fun, exciting Lorikeet, while the other one would have the Lyrebird. So, yes, it is a dark fairy. Lyrebirds are really, really good at mimicking calls. It is almost incredible. If you haven't, I really recommend you listen to it, because they can mimic things of other bird calls and things that aren't even bird calls, like chainsaws and car horns. It's truly interesting. And I feel like that could be a dark thing. It's gonna try to lure people in, maybe trick them into thinking that there's someone that's calling for help, to lure them in to attack them, or something like that, or just to be a trickster. So yeah, I think that those could be two interesting game counterparts for the birds. Now, onto the sea creatures. I'd have a stingray, a coral reef snake, and a new great white shark. The stingray and coral reef shark would be game counterparts, with the stingray being a water electric type, while the coral reef snake would be a water poison, and then a new great white shark would be water steel. Now, when I say new great white, I'm not saying that there's like a new species, I just say it like that because we already have Sharpedo, but I think it would be cool to have a much bigger one. A much more realistic shark, I'm not saying anything like a Megalodon, but something big, something a lot more, I guess, intimidating than a Sharpedo. So yes, I think this new Great White Shark Pokemon would be a Water Steel type. It definitely gives me that strong and powerful vibe of a Steel type, while also having to be a Water type. Geez, the more I say these Pokemon, the more I realize that this sounds a lot like the characters from Ty the Tasmanian Tiger. Yes, I know I've played the game, but trust me, I did not base all of my research on them. It's just a weird coincidence. So, we've already talked a lot about the Pokemon, and there are plenty more, so I'm going to just keep a lot of these more simple. I was thinking that a regional Heliolisk could be an interesting thing to add and make it a fire-electric type. I think that it could be focused more on the desert and the heat, so that could be interesting. And there are plenty of other reptiles, so I can't really come up with great ones for all of them, but dragon types, poison types, they'd fit a lot of them. Like the Thorny Devil would be a great one. A new crocodile, for example. And even a bearded dragon, I think, could be quite interesting. In terms of mammals, I think a Tasmanian Devil needs to be included. And because I struggled to really find good combinations for ice types, I made the Tasmanian Devil an ice type. It does snow in Australia, not a lot, but a lot of these animals are adapted, so I think it could be cool to have some of the other ones kind of ice, even if they don't live. Other mammals can include like a dingo, a duck-billed platypus, an echidna, and a flying fox. Again, it's just there are so many Pokemon. I've already gone on such a long tangent, and there's still more to go. So I do apologize for maybe a little bit less thoroughness for these animals. Now onto the marsupials. I had a lot of ideas for the marsupials, which is why the other two categories that were previous were cut a little bit short. So, my big idea for the marsupials would be to have, on top of a regional Kangaskhan, would be to add 2 kangaroos. We would start with something like a wallaby, which is similar to a kangaroo but isn't a kangaroo. That would be the pre-evolution. And you would get to choose which you would want to evolve it into. Yes, I was thinking that it could either be a Thunderstone or Firestone, but I just kind of feel like those are a little bit bland. I think there could be like this segment where like a certain area you have to train the Pokemon and it'll evolve. And I was thinking that the kangaroos would evolve into 2 types, a electric fighting and a fire fighting. I know we already have plenty of fire fightings, but I always feel like there's this weird clash between electric and fire, where neither of them really have an advantage, but they are rivals. And electric fighting is an unused type, which I also find strange, since usually in fighting, when you go attack quickly, it's usually being referred to as your fast as lightning. And fire, I always just kind of feel like fits really well with stuff like punching. I mean, if it didn't go well, why do we have 3 regions in a row with firefighting starter? Another idea I had, which could be interesting, would be something for koalas and drop bears. Now, I know drop bears don't exist, but it could be a cool concept, kind of like those storytime Pokemon that Nathan talked about earlier. So they could be something similar to how you would encounter Shroomish. Maybe you see an item, or you see a koala, you try to interact with it, but it's actually a drop bear. I'll keep this one pretty short, but for the bugs, I'm thinking it'd be cool if they had some different types of spiders and whatnot that were, one maybe a bug dragon and bug poison and whatnot. I didn't look up specifics because, yeah, I did start to try to find specific names, and I was horrified by the creatures that I saw. And I'm not posting any images on this because I don't want to scare you guys with those horrible monstrosities of bugs that I saw. So consider yourself lucky. And for the plants, I'll be honest, I didn't do too much research here, but wildflowers, Europhila, Protesia, I don't know, not really good at pronouncing them, but those could all be interesting flowers. They're all very pretty and unique. Now, the fossils really and truly could be anything. They could pull back extinct animals or just even make up their own. If they do make fossils, I do hope they bring back the rock typing to it, because I think it actually enables a lot of interesting types. So, I think a rock ghost type Pokemon could be really awesome. I've always wanted a rock ghost type Pokemon ever since I've played Mario Galaxy. There's this one boss that is a ghost that uses rocks to form its body, and it just was so sick. I just thought it was really cool. And I also think a rock poison could be interesting. I think that, it could be challenging, but I could totally see some sort of extinct poisonous animal be there. And now, finally, onto the starters. Now, it's debated whether Game Freak has their own set system they use to choose the starters, and if they do, that's kind of what I'm going to be basing mine off of. The theory of what they base theirs off of. So, usually the fire types are based off of a Zodiac, and I think a really cool Zodiac they haven't done, which could fit perfectly with the region, is a snake. I think another fire poison type. Seeing as we only have Salazzle with that type, I think this could be a really interesting combination. For the grass types, they tend to choose prehistoric animals, so I kind of took a little bit of liberty here to honor the game, at least. Chose a Tasmanian tiger for the grass type. Now, I know it's not really going along with a lot of the other ones, but it is at very least extinct, so I think that could be interesting. And I don't want any of the starters to have a clear advantage over the other one, so I chose to make it grass electric. Maybe it's a bit of a strange and absurd typing, but I just kind of think, why not? And for the water types, they tend to be based off of some sort of weapon. So I chose one of the most iconic Australian things I could think of, a boomerang. I mean, I'm sure you guys were just waiting for me to choose a boomerang at some point, but yes, I think the water type should be somewhat based off of a boomerang and should be a water fighting type. Because considering that all of the water types might have been based off of weapons, I find it very strange that none of them are actually fighting type. Now, you may be wondering why I never chose a frog, because they're pretty popular animals in Australia. And that's because in my Discord, I asked my viewers to submit some Pokemon suggestions, and I was gonna choose more, but I chose so many of my own freaking Pokemon, and I'm going to have to cut this down so much that unfortunately I'm not going to be able to choose them all, so I'm only going to choose one. I'm going to choose my favorite one, which was submitted by Glaceon, who came up with the idea of an ice poison type Pokemon, which would be a frog. And I already had a frog there, so I thought of kind of combining our ideas and making almost similar to like the Shellos in a way, but the Pokemon is the same Pokemon, but with different forms depending where it is. Realizing now that I'm saying that, that's more like Orikoru. I don't know why I had Shellos, but point being, we could have an ice frog located higher in the region where the ice is, a fire frog located in the desert, a grass frog located in the jungles and other grassy areas, and the normal type frog could just be somewhere else. So we could have a ice poison type, a fire poison, grass poison, and a normal poison type. I just think this was a really interesting idea, and the fact that me and Glaceon both thought it, I just thought that we were onto something, so I decided to really push it a little bit further. So yeah, that's what I have. While there are plenty of miscellaneous features I think would be awesome to have, I wanted to keep this focused more on the actual region itself than features I'd like. I'll make a follow-up video to this someday, especially if they do announce that there's going to be a new Gen 9 this year. I will make a follow-up video talking about things I'd like to see, because there's plenty of small little things I'd love to see implemented into a Pokemon game, but I just don't feel like they fit in this video because they aren't Australian. It doesn't need to be an Australian video to introduce these ideas. So, once again, thanks to Nathan for helping me, and I want to thank you guys all for watching, and I will see you guys soon on Pokemon Day. Bye!